Welcome back. So, said I was going to do a review on this about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and here we are. So, Katy Perry has released her newest album, 143, and the critic and user consensus is pretty low, to say the least. So, it's at a critic score of a 35 and a user score of a 28. If I'm not mistaken, this probably is her worst rated album when it comes to both metrics. And usually when I go into these reviews, I can think of the Destroy Lonely record I just did maybe about a week or 2 weeks ago, where I usually come to it with overtly negative albums, just frustrated, unhinged, a little bit ill-tempered. This one here, this record really doesn't warrant that for me. It's just more kind of sad, a little bit more disappointing. Because with this album, just a general kind of thing, Katy Perry, I feel like with this record, and I feel like with the past few records that she has have done, when you think of Witness and when you think of Smile, it seems that she's trying to advance her sound like just by little bits and pieces, but she also is just so far behind when it comes to both lyrical ability and also in the production front that every little tiptoe that she makes is making her kind of progression just feel so much more outdated. And this album just sounds like a pop star from another era that's really trying to garner some kind of that sound, that kind of mega pop stardom back. But the sound that she's kind of progressing into is just not really advancing much to the point where this album just feels so incredibly out of date. But we'll get to that as we talk through all of these songs here. So, Women's World was the lead single. I did a review on this particular song, talked about the music video, talked about where she was with kind of the rollout of this thing. I had a lot of fun conversations with that song in particular and that video in specific. But when you subtract the music video and let the music stand on itself, the song just becomes even more just generic and simplistic and just really hollow, especially with the empty platitudes. And while Katy Perry may have her heart in the right place, the lyricism and the songwriting is just so, it feels like boardroom talk. It feels like a boardroom got together, about 7 or 8 different people just brainstormed and threw it all these empty platitudes all together in a song and gave it to Katy Perry. It's just doesn't really have any kind of captivating songwriting at all, especially considering that we have Billie Eilish, we have Chappell Roan, we have Taylor Swift, even Olivia Rodrigo. Pop in general this year for women has been incredibly strong, and to contrast that with Katy Perry just really shows how far of a gap that we are. Gorgeous. There is some parts of this album that I do find at least a little bit interesting. Gorgeous probably is the most modern sounding song on this project with the Kim Petras feature as well. It sounds a little bit more, the bass is a little bit deeper. It does sound a little bit more grimier. It does sound a little bit more futuristic, per se. But it's really just hindered by its songwriting, especially Katy Perry. Basically, a lot of these songs, especially on the first half, boil down to is just like, if you want me, you got to prove that you want me. You have to spend money. You have to. I think there's. I don't know if this is the song or that's Gimme Gimme, but it's like crawl on you like a centipede. Doesn't give me the best imagery. Kind of actually terrifies me. But overall, just the songwriting of Gorgeous really hinders down a decent production. One of the best kind of produced songs on the project. And then we get to I'm His, He's Mine. Now, I've heard this sample. I feel like it's been in like memes and it's been in pop culture from like 5 or 7 years ago. But I'm always really just when I always wince when we always bring back these old samples and put them into newer contexts. And this song is a great example of where it just gets shoehorned in and it just sounds really just. This is the song on here that repulses me the most, especially with Doechii on here. I really like Doechii's like songs, and I think her record's actually pretty decent from this year. But it just overall, especially the hook is just la da dee, la da da, and overall it's a really big clump of a mess with kind of a tacked on sample, and not to mention just the beat itself, the bass doesn't really hit all that hard, and it doesn't really carry any kind of flow or interesting kind of pace to it to make it even just interesting. This is by far the worst song on this project. Both Katy Perry and Doechii tries her best, I guess, but overall, I'm his, he's mine is probably one of the worst songs she has released this decade. I'm going to be brutally honest. Now, Wonder is the last song on this project, and it does offer at least something. The lyrics are heartfelt, and they do offer something that feels like Katy Perry actually wrote them. Now, that's very that's very offensive and very against all the other songs. She may have wrote all these other songs. She probably did write a lot of this material along with other people, but Wonder feels like this was just her writing the song, basically talking about her child and saying just like, when you get older, don't lose the wonder, don't lose your innocence, don't lose the amazing wonder of childhood as you get older. While the beat is not the greatest and it does sound very generic, I think this kind of lyrical content is something that I would appreciate more from Katy Perry, especially as she has been in the pop scene for so incredibly long, that I think it would be nice to hear a more mature, maybe more grounded Katy Perry. Maybe not even make a pop record, maybe make something that's a little bit more maybe singer-songwriter, to be honest, because she's still a pretty decent singer. I think she needs to strip back, get rid of Dr.Luke, and just make a record that just feels very heartfelt, very honest, and very genuine. Because I think with Dr.Luke in tow, and I'll get to that once we get to the end of this thing here, I think with Dr.Luke in tow, it's making her sound so incredibly out of date and just expired. And then you have Artificial, which Artificial has the song has Jid on it. Jid brings the best performance of this entire album. He does carry that artificial AI kind of concept through his entire verse. It does make the song stand out a little bit more than most. There's also Gimme Gimme with 21 Savage. 21 Savage just brings a pretty phone-in verse. Overall, these features, Kim Petras isn't bad either, but Kim Petras and Jid are definitely the biggest standards when it comes to the features. But across all of these songs, besides Maybe Gorgeous, the biggest problem, and now where with Katy Perry, I'm more just like sad. With Dr. Luke, he sounds even more out of date than Katy Perry does, because these beats feel like they're from that 2010 2013 era, with Gorgeous showing a little bit as just like, oh, maybe I've listened to something from the 2020s. Dr. Luke has no creativity. He has no creative bone in his body when it comes to making these more fun and interesting beats. They just sound super, super, super generic. And when you put them together with Katy Perry's kind of underwhelming and not really developed songwriting, it just makes everything fall apart at the seams. I think the production is probably the worst part of this album, especially when you consider I'm His, He's Mine, with that terrible just sample interpolation put into the. It just seems so just hapdash and just thrown in there just to try to hop on some kind of trend of putting these old samples in newer songs. It's one of the worst examples I've ever heard of it. Women's World again is very generic synth pop that tries to harken back to an older sound but bring it into a more modern context. Not great at all. And just a lot of these songs, like there's All Mine, there's Crush, there's Nirvana. These songs carry the same kind of concept of whether maybe it's love lost, maybe rediscovering what love is, or maybe it's just like I didn't know what love is before, but now that I've met you, I'm kind of rediscovering all this kind of very generic kind of stuff that we've discovered in pop music and kind of went through in pop music before. All of this just coinciding with just very, very boring, very typical, and very neutered production. So overall, when we look at Katy Perry's 143, it's really hard to. I don't want to do it. I don't want to give it a 1. But you know what? I'm just going to just bump it up just to a 2, because Wonder is okay, even though the beat is incredibly boring. Jid brings a good performance on his feature, and I think Gorgeous is at least a decent beat. But overall, Katy Perry, I think if we're just gonna be heart to heart, as I was saying before, you need to get rid of Dr. Luke, and you really need to start from square one. Because I can think of an example like Lady Gaga. She had all these really just bombastic and really just these great pop records, but then she found a way to scale it back with Joanne. And I think Katy Perry could do something like that. And I think that would do wonders, especially for her songwriting and for her career in the long term. That's just my personal thing that could work out for her. She's more than welcome to do whatever she wants. If she wants to continue down this route, that's totally fine. But I think it's a law of diminishing returns if we keep going down this sound. So I hope for the best for Katy Perry. Dr. Luke needs to leave the industry because he's seeming to be incredibly out of date, and also everything else with him. But overall, that's just my thoughts on 143. You're more than welcome to have yours. If you love this record, it's fantastic. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm losing my voice. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you for giving me support. And I will talk to you again very soon.